All right, starting up a little bit early so I can check out the audio and everything, make sure everything's running in order. Sounds good on D-Lot or Kick or Rumble, sorry. And waiting now for X to stop loading. Everything sounds good on D Live. Everything sounds good on Twitch. Got to turn Kick up. Kick sounds good. Go to live, see what we got going on there on YouTube. And like before, I have to add the video onto the playlist. It doesn't do that for you when you're streaming on Rumble to YouTube. So sounds good on YouTube too. So I still have everything's supposed to be loading on YouTube or X Pro, but it's not. So I gotta kind of let that do its own thing. So here we go. It's at the top of the hour. I got everything up and running, and I am getting ready to start conspiracy. So I'm going to be continuing where I left off last week. Um, well, let me go ahead and just get into the actual stream first before I do that. I'll do my countdown and then do an introduction for editing purposes. So here we go. Let me get this done. I'm not even going to wait for X Pro to kick in. I'm just going to go ahead and start. 3, 2, 1, now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Conspiracy here on the wonderful world of weirdness. I'm your host, Roger Hanson, and today we are going to be diving a little bit deeper in what I was discussing in the previous episode concerning. It started out concerning Sibel Edmond and her case, and I'm going to go over some things that she has mentioned in some of her episodes, which kind of hit home when it comes to what I'm talking about here with modern day conspiracy. Now, the season started out with me discussing JFK and some of the things that went into uh, uh, the what I consider the modern day conspiracies and the things that are involved with it. I think I did a pretty good job at that. And the reason why I did that was because it's building up to this kind of stuff. Now, this is where we start getting into Sibel Edmonds' story, and hopefully, if I have enough time with the 12 episodes I'm wanting to do, I can reach into a little bit about psy wars, psychological warfare, and everything. But I want to stay focused on this because this is very important. Because once I covered all the stuff that concerned JFK and things related to him, I went a little farther with DARPA. And then after DARPA, I did Sibel Edmond. And with Sibel Edmond, she discusses things about nuclear proliferation and things of that nature. And that's where I'm going to continue here because this is another part of it. Also, she talks about Operation Gladio B or Gladio B, whichever ones that you want to, and a lot of this has to do with Gladio B. So, if you guys want to check out some of the stuff that I've already started with this topic, I suggest going back and watching the previous episode of this if you want to check it out. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start with the reading. I hope you guys enjoy. State secrets privilege is a legal doctrine in the United States that allows the government to withhold information from legal proceedings if disclosure is deemed to threaten national security. It was formally recognized by the United States Supreme Court in 1953 in the case of United States versus Reynolds. In that case, the government refused to release details about a military aircraft crash that killed civilian contractors, arguing that the documents contained sensitive military secrets. The court upheld the government's position, setting a precedent that allowed executive branch agencies to block legal discovery by invoking the privilege. Since then, the state secrets privilege has been invoked numerous times in both civil and criminal cases, particularly where intelligence agents or agencies or covert operations are involved. It has been used to dismiss lawsuits entirely, prevent the admission of evidence, or stop the discovery process. While intended to protect vital national interests, critics argue that it has often been employed to conceal wrongdoing, prevent accountability, or avoid public embarrassment. The privilege grants the executive branch broad discretion, and courts have typically deferred to the government's assertion without conducting thorough independent review, particularly in national security cases. Throughout the Cold War, the state secret privilege was used to protect operatives linked to surveillance, espionage, nuclear development, and covert foreign interventions. In the modern era, its use expanded dramatically in the wake of the September attacks in 2001. It was regularly invoked to shield details of programs like extraordinary rendition, secret prisons, torture practices, and mass surveillance efforts from public scrutiny or judicial oversight. One of the most controversial examples invoked the case of Khalid el-Masri, a German citizen who was abducted by the Central Intelligence Agency, flown to a black site in Afghanistan, and allegedly tortured before being released without charge. When he attempted to sue in an American court, the government invoked the state secret privilege, and the case was dismissed. Similarly, the privilege was used in litigation involving victims of the National Security Agency's warrantless wiretapping program, in which plaintiffs argued that their constitutional rights had been violated. In those cases, the privilege prevented the presentation of key evidence that could confirm the government's actions. Sibel Edmonds, a former translator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also faced the state secrets privilege when she attempted to bring her whistleblower allegations forward. After disclosing alleged misconduct, espionage, and infiltration within the Bureau, she was fired. When she sought legal redress, the Department of Justice invoked the state secret's privilege to prevent her from testifying or even disclosing the nature of her claims. Multiple courts upheld this use of the privilege, effectively silencing her from providing details in public or legal forums. The use of the state secret privilege has increased alongside the growth of the national security state. In many cases, it has been a decisive factor in protecting programs tied to surveillance technologies, cyber operations, and intelligence partnerships with foreign governments. It has been applied to contractors, government employees, and private citizens who have encountered or attempted to expose classified programs. Legal scholars have noted that the privilege lacks statutory oversight and can be abused because judges are not always granted access to the evidence being withheld. The executive branch can unilaterally assert the privilege, and the courts may rely on government affidavits rather than inspecting the contested material themselves. In some rare instances, judges have asked to see the documents in private, but even then, the decision often favored non-disclosure. The privilege has affected journalists, former intelligence agents, or employees, engineers, whistleblowers, and legal advocacy groups. Its broad application has created a legal barrier to accountability for those alleged unconstitutional or illegal conduct by intelligence agencies and military entities. Despite occasional calls for reform, no comprehensive legislation has been passed to limit or define more precisely how the privilege should be used or reviewed by independent courts. In the broader picture, the state secrets privilege has become a critical legal tool for managing the boundary between state power and public knowledge. While it serves a legitimate function in safeguarding sensitive operations, its use has often led to accusations of concealment, overreach, and suppression of truth, especially when used to block judicial inquiry into government actions that may have violated domestic or international law. When a case or information is retroactively classified, it means that material which was originally unclassified, publicly available, or even already part of court records is later designated as classified by a government authority. This process involves applying a national security classification for information after it has been created, disseminated, or exposed, essentially changing its status from unclassified to classified after the fact. This action is typically carried out by an executive agency or directed by officials in the intelligence, defense, or national security sectors. Retroactive classification is controversial because it raises serious concerns about transparency, fairness, and adherence to the rule of law. It often emerges in legal matters involving whistleblowers, journalists, or individuals connected to national security issues. One of the major consequences of this process is that it can criminalize the possession, discussion, or dissemination of information that was previously legal to handle. For example, someone who lawfully obtained or referred to an unclassified document could later be accused of a security violation if the document is redesigned as classified. In legal contexts, retroactive classification can be used to suppress evidence, prevent defendants from mounting a full defense, or even to stop individuals from testifying. It can seal court filings, withdraw previous available public documents, and impose gag orders on those involved. This mechanism often limits press coverage and curtails congressional or judicial scrutiny of government conduct, particularly what particularly when that conduct involves covert programs, intelligent operations, or allegations of wrongdoing. One prominent example of retroactive classification was the case of Sibel Edmonds. She tried to disclose internal misconduct and alleged espionage within the Federal Bureau of Investigation, including material that had already been mentioned in public records and congressional discussions. Later, much of that material was classified after the fact by the Department of Justice, making it a punishable offense for her to speak about it or even confirm certain publicly known facts. This effectively silenced her and prevented further legal or legislative examination of her claims. Another significant issue is that retroactive classification concentrates power within the executive branch. The decision to reclassify material is usually not subject to immediate judicial or legislative approval, allowing agencies to justify the move based on vague claims of national security. Critics argue this authority can be abused to conceal misconduct, avoid embarrassment, or halt legal accountability rather than to protect genuine security interests. This practice can also impact public access to history. Documents once housed in public archives can be removed. Academic research can be undermined, and public understanding of key events may be distorted. This erodes trust in government transparency and allows politically motivated secrecy to shape the public record. Retroactive classification has become a powerful tool in controlling sensitive information, especially when used to preempt or shut down investigations into intelligence programs or international dealings. While the stated purpose is often to safeguard national interests, the use of this tactic frequently undermines the principles of open government, due process, and informed citizenship. Its deployment continues to draw criticism from legal experts, civil liberties groups, and investigative journalists who see it as an impediment to justice and democratic oversight. Influence peddling refers to the practice of using one's position, connections, or access to powerful individuals or institutions in order to gain favors, advantages, or preferential treatment, often in exchange for money, political support, or other benefits. It does not necessarily involve direct bribery or illegal actions, but it frequently crosses ethical boundaries and can involve serious conflicts of interest. In many countries, influence peddling is considered a form of corruption, particularly when it undermines fair decision making in government, business, or legal systems. One prominent example of influencing peddling that came to light involved the lobbying firm Jack Abramoff operated in the United States. Abramoff was connected to a vast network of political figures and used his influence to secure favorable legislation and government contracts for his clients, primarily Native American tribal casinos. In exchange, he directed campaign contributions, gifts, and expensive trips to lawmakers. The scandal led to several convictions, including that of Congressman Bob Ney, a- a- and prompted a national debate on lobbying reform and ethics in Washington. Another case was that of former Illinois Governor Bob Blagojevich, who was accused and convicted of attempting to sell or trade the Senate seat vacated by Barack Obama after he became president. Blago- Blago- Blagojevich was caught on wiretaps openly discussing what he could gain in exchange for appointing someone to the position, including campaign contributions or a prestigious job. Though his actions were more directly criminal than typical influence peddling, the case illustrates how access to political appointments can be exploited for personal gain. In France, former President Nicolas Sarkozy faced legal troubles for alleged influence peddling when he was accused of offering a judicial appointment to a magistrate in exchange for inside information on an investigation involving his political party finances. This case highlighted how influence peddling can operate at the highest levels of power, often blending legal ambiguity with overt misconduct. In Brazil, the Petrobras corruption scandal, often referred to as Operation Car Wash, exposed widespread influence peddling involving state-run oil company contracts. Dozens of top politicians and business executives were implicated in a scheme in which contractors overcharged Petrobras for projects and funneled part of the money into campaign funds and personal bribes. Former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was convicted in connection with the scandal, though his convictions were later annulled. In South Korea, former President Park Geun-hye was removed from office and imprisoned due to a scandal involving her close confidante, Choi Soon-sil, who had official government who had no official government position, but used his connection to Park to pressure major conglomerates like Samsung into donating millions of dollars to foundations under Choi's control. This was seen as a classic case of influence peddling disguised under the guise of philanthrop, philo- philanthrop, philanthropy, philanthropy, under the guise of philanthropy, where access to power was monetized for private interests. The European Union has also seen allegations of influence peddling, including a scandal known as Otar no, Otargate, in which members of the European Parliament were accused of accepting cash and gifts from Qatari officials in exchange for favorable political positions or resolutions. These incidents underscore the international scope of influence peddling, particularly where lobbying laws are weak or where enforcement is inconsistent. In the corporate world, former Enron executives were accused of using their access to lawmakers and energy regulators to shape policy and deregulation in ways that benefit their company, contributing to the energy crisis in California and eventually to Enron's collapse. Their ability to shape rules through informal channels and political contributions blurred the line between lobbying and influence peddling, demonstrating the complex nature of corporate political relationships. These examples show that influence peddling often operates in the gray area of law and ethics, capitalizing on personal relationships, insider access, and the opaque corridors of power. It erodes public trust in institutions, tilts decision-making towards those with resources or connections, and distorts democratic processes. Governments around the world have attempted to counter it through transparency laws, lobbying registries, conflict of interest rules, and independent ethics watchdogs. But enforcement remains uneven. In all cases, the central issue with influence peddling is the subversion of fair and impartial governance. Whether it involves the trading of favors, the silent pressure applied behind closed doors, or the leveraging of old friendships for new contracts, influence peddling undermines the idea that decisions should be made in the public's best interest. Instead, it promotes a system where decisions are made based on access and influence, not on merit or legality. Several instances throughout modern history illustrate how information related to illegal arms transfer and nuclear technology proliferation has been suppressed by governments, intelligence services, and influential figures. These cases typically involve national security concerns, geopolitical strategies, or the protection of sensitive alliances, often resulting in deliberate obstruction, secrecy, or the silencing of whistleblowers. One of the most prominent examples involves the case of the Israeli nuclear program and the unauthorized transfer of nuclear materials from the United States. The NUMEC affair in the 1960s and 1970s raised suspicions that a considerable amount of weapons-grade plutonium had been diverted from a Pennsylvania facility to Israel. Though internal investigations were conducted by various agencies, including the Atomic Energy Commission and the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the full findings were never publicly disclosed. High-ranking officials reportedly concluded that the material had likely ended up in Israel, but no definitive public statement was ever made and no prosecution occurred. The case remained largely classified, and even decades later, significant portions of the documentations remained redacted, indicating the extent of suppression. Another case that drew attention involved Abdul Qadir Khan, a Pakistani nuclear physicist who ran a black market nuclear proliferation network that supplied nuclear technologies and designs to countries such as Iran, North Korea, and Libya. Despite numerous signs over the years that Khan's network was operating internationally, early warnings were often ignored or downplayed. Western intelligence services were aware of his activities but chose not to intervene aggressively, largely due to geopolitical concerns regarding Pakistan's cooperation in other matters, such as its role in the Cold War and later the War on Terror. Hold on a minute.
Awakening from an epic dream, awakening from the long dark night. Awakening from history, awakening from duality. The liberation of the human soul to consciousness of the one and all.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. I'll get everything straightened out again. Okay, so let's do this. Another case that drew attention involved Abdul Qadir Khan, a Pakistani nuclear physicist who ran a black market nuclear proliferation network that supplied nuclear technologies and designs to countries such as Iran, North Korea, and Libya. Despite numerous signs over the years that Khan's network was operating internationally, early warnings were often ignored or downplayed. Western intelligence services were aware of his activities, but chose not to intervene aggressively, largely due to geographical concerns regarding Pakistan's cooperation in other matters such as its role in the Cold War and later the War on Terror. When the network was finally exposed in the early 2000s, Khan was placed under house arrest in Pakistan but was never extradited or tried in an international court. Many details about the network's full scope and the individuals involved remain classified or suppressed by multiple governments. There are also allegations involving the Iran-Contra affair, in which the United States government facilitated secret arms sales to Iran despite an arms embargo, and used the proceeds to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua. The entire operation was kept from Congress and the American public. When it was finally uncovered, numerous officials were investigated, but many of the most critical documents were withheld on national security grounds. President George H.W. Bush later issued pardons for several key figures involved. The affair demonstrated how classified operations involving arms transfer could be conducted in total secrecy, and how internal oversight mechanisms could be bypassed or obstructed. Another significant example involves the Iraq War and the buildup to the 2003 invasion. During this period, there were claims that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Intelligence was manipulated to selectively present, no, or selectively presented to justify military action. When no such weapons were found, it became evident that this dissenting intelligence analysis had been suppressed or ignored. Though this case did not involve illegal arms transfer in the traditional sense, it highlighted how the manipulation and suppression of intelligence information could be used to achieve broader political or strategic objectives. In South Africa, the apartheid-era government had an undeclared nuclear weapons program which it developed in collaboration with outside actors. There have been allegations that Israel played a role in this development, with secret nuclear cooperation taking place in the 1970s and 1980s. The full extent of this partnership remains classified in both countries. The destruction of records and suppression of whistleblowers ensured that many questions about the nature and purpose of this cooperation remained unanswered to this day. Another example comes from whistleblower accounts in the United Kingdom regarding illegal arms sales to Iraq prior to the Gulf War. In the early 1990s, the Arms to Iraq scandal emerged, revealing that British companies had sold equipment and materials to Iraq in violation of export regulations. The British government was accused of facilitating or turning a blind eye to these transactions. Official inquiries followed, but many documents were withheld, and full accountability was limited. This was a clear example of how economic and political interests could override legal restrictions and ethical concerns. Again, we come to Sibel Edmonds, a former translator for the Federal Bureau of Investigations, who made allegations that elements within the United States government had knowledge of networks involved in illicit arms trading and nuclear technology proliferation. She claimed that individuals connected to foreign governments and lobby organizations were actively participating in these activities, and that this information was deliberately withheld from oversight bodies. Her case was subject to the invocation of the state secrets privilege, which effectively silenced her in court and prevented further public disclosure. The use of state secrets and classification as tools to suppress information has been a recurring method in many of these cases. Documents are often retroactively classified. Whistleblowers are gagged or are often or discredited. The oversight by legislative bodies is circumvented under the justification of protecting national security. This creates an environment where the truth becomes difficult to uncover, and those attempting to bring it to light face significant personal and legal obstacles. These examples reflect how complex and murky the intersection of arms transfers, nuclear proliferation, and government secrecy can be. The suppression of information, whether through formal legal channels or informal pressure and obfuscation is a consistent pattern in cases where exposure would compromise geopolitical strategies, powerful alliances, or the reputation of high ranking individuals. In many instances, the truth emerges slowly over decades, if at all, leaving much of the public record incomplete or contested. There have been multiple instances throughout the Federal Bureau of Investigation's history in which internal misconduct has been exposed, revealing issues related to abuse of authority, corruption, suppression of evidence, political bias, and violations of constitutional rights. These cases span decades and often involve controversial figures, secret programs, or mismanagement at the highest level. Here are several prominent examples that can illustrate the nature and scope of these the internal misconduct within the agency. One of the most significant and long-standing examples of misconduct within the Federal Bureau of Investigation is the surveillance and harassment campaign known as COINTELPRO, which operated officially from the 1950s through the early 1970s. This program targeted civil rights leaders, anti-war activists, and other political dissidents deemed subversive. Under the direction of then-Director J. Edgar Hoover, the agency engaged in illegal wiretappings, infiltration of organizations, distribution of forged documents, blackmail, and the spreading of false information to discredit individuals and movements. Among the most infamous targets was Martin Luther King Jr., the Black Panther Party, and various students and anti-war groups. The public only learned about COINTELPRO after a group of activists broke into an FBI office in Pennsylvania in 1971 and leaked internal documents to the press, sparking a widespread outrage and eventual congressional investigation through the Church Committee. Another major scandal involved the FBI's role in the case of Whitey Bulger, a notorious Boston crime boss. It was revealed that Bulger had served as an informant for the FBI while simultaneously running a violent criminal enterprise. In exchange for his cooperation, certain agents shielded him from prosecution and suppressed investigations into his activities. Some agents not only turned a blind eye to Bulger's crimes, but were also accused of actively tipping him off to law enforcement actions. The relationship between Bulger and the FBI lasted for years and resulted in numerous wrongful convictions, compromised investigations, and a loss of public trust. Several agents were eventually prosecuted or forced to resign, and the scandal exposed deep corruption within the Boston field office. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the case of FBI agent Robert Hansen emerged as one of the most damaging spy cases in American history. Hansen was a senior counterintelligence agent who passed classified information to the Soviet Union and later Russia over the span of more than 2 decades. His betrayal compromised numerous operations and led to the deaths of multiple informants. Despite warning, Despite warnings and irregular behavior, Hansen was not caught for years due to internal oversight failures and lax monitoring. His eventual arrest in 2001 revealed serious weaknesses in the Bureau's internal security systems. Another high profile example of misconduct came to light during the investigation into the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Informant Ahmad Salam, who was working with the FBI and infiltrating extremist groups, had warned his handlers about the plot and even offered to substitute fake explosives for real ones. His offer was reportedly declined, and the bombing occurred, killing 6 people and injuring hundreds. Records later surfaced in which Salam expressed frustration with how his warnings had been ignored. The incident raised questions about whether the FBI had mishandled the case and allowed the bombing to proceed in order to justify further surveillance or strengthen future cases. The post-September 11 era also brought scrutiny to the FBI's conduct, especially in relation to the abuse of national security letters, warrantless surveillance, and the handling of intelligence related to terrorist threats. Internal reports and audits revealed that the Bureau had repeatedly overstepped its legal authority in collecting phone records and financial information on American citizens without proper judicial oversight. In some cases, documents were altered to obtain wiretaps, and key facts were omitted from court submissions to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. These revelations led to widespread criticism and demands for reform. In the investigation of Richard Jewell, the security guard initially suspected in the 1996 Atlanta Olympic bombing, the FBI was accused of leaking false and damaging information to the media. Jewell was never formally charged and was later exonerated, but the intense scrutiny and public humiliation he endured was attributed to missteps and misconduct by investigators. This case became a cautionary example of rushing into judgment without solid evidence. More recently, the Bureau faced criticism over its handling of politically sensitive investigations during and after the 2006 presidential election. Both major political parties accused the FBI of acting with bias at different points. An internal inspector general reports revealed mistakes and failures in the following procedures, particularly in the surveillance of political campaign aides. One notable instance involved the use of a controversial dossier to obtain a surveillance warrant under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, with subsequent investigations determining that key pieces of evidence were unverified or misrepresented. Another example is the mishandling of the Larry Nassar sexual abuse case. Multiple gymnasts came forward alleging that agents failed to investigate credible accusation against the USA gymnast doctor. An internal Department of Justice investigation found that the FBI office in Indianapolis failed to follow proper protocol and made serious errors in the case, allowing Nasser to continue abusing victims for over a year after the first allegations were reported. Several agents involved were accused of failing to document complaints or follow up on key leads. These examples reflect a consistent pattern in which lapses in judgment, institutional arrogance, or political influence have led to serious breaches in duty within the agency. Despite numerous reforms and oversight efforts, questions remain about the accountability, transparency, and the effectiveness of internal checks on the power held by one of the most influential law enforcement bodies in the United States. There have been several significant cases throughout the history of the Federal Bureau of Investigation in which unauthorized disclosure of sensitive or declassified information occurred. These incidents involved either agents, contractors, or external actors with access to internal operations. And they often resulted in political fallout, national security risks, or changes to internal security procedures. Each case illustrates different aspects of how internal breaches of confidentiality have affected the agent's integrity, its relationship with the agency's integrity, its relationship with other institutions, and public trust. One of the earliest and most infamous unauthorized disclosures was connected to the secret counterintelligence operation under the direction of former Director J. Edgar Hoover. During his tenure, Hoover amassed an extensive collection of private files on political figures, civil rights leaders, and even presidents. While the full extent of the misuse of this information is still debated, it is clear that confidential intelligence was used to exert pressure and influence rather than strictly for national security. The leak of such surveillance activity against figures like Martin Luther King Jr. was initially denied, but later confirmed through internal documents that came to light during the 1970s, especially through the Church Committee's hearings in Congress. These revelations show that agents within the agency were aware of, and in some cases complicit in leaking damaging or compromising information for political purposes. A pivotal example of unauthorized disclosure happened with the anonymous whistleblower known as Deep Throat, who provided critical information to journalists Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein during the Watergate scandal. Years later, he was revealed to be Mark Felt, the associate director of the FBI at the time. Felt disclosed internal investigative details about the Nixon administration's effort to obstruct justice, including evidence related to illegal surveillance, political espionage, and the sabotage of opposition figures. While many viewed Felt's actions as courageous, especially in exposing corruption at the highest level of government, they also raised serious questions about the breach of confidentiality within the agency. In the late 1990s In early 2000s, the espionage case of Robert Hansen marked another major internal breach. Hansen was a senior FBI counterintelligence agent who secretly passed vast amounts of classified material to the Soviet Union and later Russia over more than 2 decades. His disclosures included detailed information about surveillance techniques, double agents, and intelligence operatives, and they compromised numerous investigations and led to the death of informants abroad. Hansen was not caught until 2001, and his case exposed grave flaws in the FBI's internal monitoring and security protocols. He had been able to move between sensitive roles without detection, and his motivations were rooted in ideology and financial gain. Another significant disclosure occurred after the 2001 terrorist attacks when former FBI translator Sibel Edmond alleged that she had uncovered serious breaches in security within the agency's language division. She claimed that fellow translators were deliberately misinterpreting or blocking intelligence translations, and that sensitive information was being improperly handled, possibly compromising counterterrorism efforts. Edmonds later stated that certain internal communications and activities were being shared with foreign entities, and that efforts to report these violations led to retaliation and the invocation of the state's secret privilege to silence her. Though her disclosures were never proven in court due to classification barriers, they drew attention to internal vulnerabilities in managing sensitive data. In more recent years, several leaks of classified materials or sensitive case information have come through digital channels, sometimes from external actors and sometimes from within. During the investigation into Russia's interference in the 2016 election, internal FBI communications, including text messages between high-ranking agents, were leaked to the press and used to question the impartiality of the investigators. Though not technically espionage, these leaks damaged the agency's image of neutrality and led to accusations of political bias, reinforcing the dangers of unauthorized disclosure in high-profile cases. There were also unauthorized leaks related to ongoing investigations into political figures, such as during the investigation of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. Internal information about the reopening and closing of the investigation was reportedly leaked to the media, affecting public perception during a sensitive electoral period. The Justice Department later criticized the FBI's handling of both its communication strategy and the potential leaks from within. In another case, a former FBI agent named Terry Albury was prosecuted for disclosing classified documents to journalists. He had access to national security information and admitted to leaking documents that exposed internal surveillance practices, particularly those affecting minority communities and foreign nationals. Albury claimed he acted as a whistleblower to inform the public about systemic abuses. Nevertheless, he was sentenced to prison for violating federal laws regarding classified information, reinforcing the strict legal framework around such disclosures, regardless of motive. These examples demonstrate the range of unauthorized disclosures that have affected the FBI, from politically motivated leaks and espionage to whistleblowing and ideological defiance. Each instance has led to legal consequences, policy changes, and debate over the balance between transparency and secrecy. Whether these disclosures revealed corruption or compromised national security, they have repeatedly shown that the handling of sensitive information remains one of the most vulnerable and controversial aspects of the Bureau's operation. In addition to Sibel Edmonds, there have been other individuals who were either terminated, forced to resign, or sidelined from their position at the Federal Bureau of Investigation under the justification of security violations or internal misconduct, though some later claimed these actions were retaliatory. These cases, while not as widely known as Edmonds, highlights ongoing concerns about how internal whistleblowers and dissenters are sometimes treated, especially when their revelations pose institutional or political risks. One notable case is that of Bassem Youssef, a senior FBI counterterrorism agent of Egypt descent. Youssef was one of the highest-ranking Arabic-speaking agents in the FBI and had been praised for his counterterrorism work. However, he was removed from his position and reassigned to a less influential role. The official reasoning involved administrative and internal policy issues, but Youssef argued that he was sidelined after raising concerns about the Bureau's handling of intelligence relating to Middle East terrorism and its failure to promote quality agents of Middle Eastern background. He filed a formal complaint and was later supported by the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility, which found that he had faced retaliation. Another case involved John Roberts, a supervisory special agent who served in the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibilities. Roberts claimed he faced retaliation for exposing misconduct and corruption within the agency. He testified before Congress and alleged that high-ranking officials had covered up serious infractions, including improper sexual behavior and abuse of power. Though not formally terminated, Roberts' career was reportedly stymied, and he was marginalized following his disclosures. Fred Whitehurst is another example, a chemist and forensic examiner at the FBI Crime Lab. Whitehurst became a whistleblower in the 1990s when he exposed serious procedural and scientific flaws in the lab's practices. He accused colleagues of falsifying evidence and violating protocol in major criminal cases. Though he was not immediately fired, he faced intense pressure, professional isolation, and eventually accepted a settlement and left the Bureau. His case led to a major overhaul of the FBI lab and brought national attention to issues of excuse me, and brought national attention to issues of forensic integrity. Whew, that was rough. That snuck up on me. Now we have Colin Raleigh, an FBI special agent and legal counsel, sent a memo to FBI Director Robert Mueller shortly after the attacks on September the 11th, 2001, detailing how Bureau headquarters had ignored evidence from the Minneapolis field office about a suspected terrorist, Zacharias Moussaoui. While he was not fired, Riley claimed while she was not fired, Riley claimed that she faced internal pressure and resisted following her public pressure and resistance following her public disclosure. Hold on, guys, I gotta take a drink of coffee. Yeah, I got pretty rough. All this reading causes problems with the throat. I gotta get that coffee out of the way. It keeps messing with my mouth too. Okay. There we go. Now I gotta figure out where I was. Yeah. So, brought it to, okay, Colleen Raleigh, an FBI special agent and legal counsel, sent a memo to FBI Director Robert Mueller shortly after the attacks of September 11, 2001, detailing how Bureau headquarters had ignored evidence from the Minneapolis field office about a suspected terrorist, Zacharias Moussaoui. While she was not fired, Raleigh claimed she faced internal pressure and resistance following her public disclosures. She was named a Time magazine person in the year of 2002 for her whistleblowing, but later retired early, citing institutional resistance to reform. Jane Turner, another veteran FBI agent, was removed from her position after raising concerns about mishandling of evidence and mismanagement within the agency's child crimes and violent crimes program. She alleged that FBI agents were stealing items from the site of the crash of TWA Flight 800, and that internal corruption and incompetence were going unaddressed. Turner filed a whistleblower complaint and, like others, faced retaliation and professional hardship until she finally left the Bureau. These cases, including that of Edmonds, collectively suggest a pattern where individuals within the FBI who raise concerns about ethics, security lapses, or internal wrongdoings may face career setbacks or termination, often under the pretext of security violations or internal discipline. While the Bureau has made statements about protecting whistleblowers and encouraging internal accountability, these examples continue to raise questions about the scrutiny of those commitments and the systemic barriers to reform within one of the most powerful domestic intelligence agencies in the world. There have been long-standing allegations and suspicions surrounding covert arms trades and nuclear technology proliferation involving a complex web of intelligence agencies, front companies, and intermediary nations. In particularly, the Central Intelligence Agency has been implicated through various whistleblower accounts and investigative reports in using front companies to facilitate the movement of restricted technologies and weapons to allies and strategic partners, including Israel, Turkey, and Pakistan. Some of these operations allegedly use transit corridors through countries like no, Azer, uh, Azerbaijan, which played a key logistic, logi- which played a key logistical role due to its location and ties with both the United States and regional actors. While direct official confirmations while direct official confirmations are rare due to the classified nature of such operations, a few companies and entities have been repeatedly mentioned in whistleblower testimony in investigative circles. Among the most significant are those connected to the global nuclear smuggling network that had ties to the Pakistani nuclear scientist Abdul Qadir Khan. The Khan network, as it came to be known, reportedly operated with a complex infrastructure of shell companies, logistical channels, and false end-user certificates. Though not all were directly tied to the Central Intelligence Agency, many appear to have operated in parallel or with tacit knowledge by intelligence communities, including the American one. One of the alleged fronts that has come up in several accounts, including those made by former FBI translator and whistleblower Sibel Edmond, involved a company with links to Turkish American business interests that worked in tandem with officials tied to Turkey's military industry complex. These companies allegedly acted as intermediaries for the transfer of restricted materials and dual-use technology, some of which had nuclear applications. These companies were also said to be tied to prominent lobbying organizations in Washington, which provided them access and protection from scrutiny. According to Edmonds and others, these front companies operated out of Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, used diplomatic cover to avoid customs detection, and coordinated transfer to secondary locations, including Israel, Azerbaijan, and ultimately Pakistan. Other companies reportedly acted as shipping and logistics firms, with their real purpose being the transportation of components, sensitive electronic systems, and nuclear technology. Several of these firms were registered in either Virginia or Maryland, areas known for proximity to intelligence infrastructure and cover operations. Some of them were defense subcontractors or technology consultancies that served as intermediaries between large weapons manufacturers and foreign recipients. Their operations were facilitated under the guise of cooperative defense agreements or foreign military sales, with paperwork obscuring the true nature of the cargo or its final destination. Azerbaijan was seen as a critical hub in this process. It was with its strategic geography, bridging Turkey, Iran, Russia, and Central Asia, and its close working relationship with both the United States and Israel. It served as a transit point for materials that would eventually reach Pakistan. Military bases and airfields in Azerbaijan, some of which were accessible to NATO and Israel personnel, provided logistical support. Private aircraft and diplomatic shipments were allegedly used to bypass export controls, with intelligence operatives coordinating these shipments under commercial or diplomatic covers. Israel played a significant role in this alleged network, not only as a participant in military cooperation agreements, but also as a source of certain technologies that could be adapted for nuclear weapons use. According to various accounts, Israeli firms with deep ties to the country's intelligence services worked with Turkish and American intermediaries to transfer technologies to third parties. In some cases, the technology was rerouted through Turkish defense firms or brokers, which gave plausible deniability to the original source. Within the United States, retired officials and intelligence community insiders have hinted at the existence of long-standing operations that allowed sensitive technology transfer under the oversight of national security directives. The rationale behind this, in some interpretations, was to allow Pakistan to maintain a deterrent capability against India, to strengthen regional alliances, or to secure cooperation on counterterrorism efforts during the post-Cold War and post-September 2001 period. Though hard evidence is difficult to secure in these matters due to classification and destruction of records, the cumulative allegations made by insiders, whistleblowers, and investigative journalists suggest a deliberate network of front companies with intelligence links. These networks allegedly move materials and weapons systems across international borders using a combination of legal loopholes, diplomatic protection, and covert logistical chains. The intersection of lobbying, commercial defense contracting, and international operations further clouded accountability. Allegations also persist that certain officials in the United States Department of State, Department of Defense, and intelligence communities shielded or enabled these operations under the justification of maintaining strategic alliances or pursuing broader geopolitical goals. Ultimately, while no major prosecutions have brought these alleged front companies into full public view, their repeated mention across several credible whistleblower accounts and reports points to a broader clandestine architecture architecture that was deeply embedded within post-Cold War international relations. The involvement of the Central Intelligence Agency in facilitating or tolerating such operations remains a subject of contention, classified secrecy, and ongoing speculation. Several front companies have been implicated in the covert transfer of nuclear technology and materials to Pakistan, often under the guise of legitimate commercial operations. These entities help facilitate the acquisition and shipment of sensitive equipment while bypassing international export controls, although establishing direct links to intelligence agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency is challenging due to the secretive nature of these activities. Certain companies have been identified in multiple investigations as participants in these networks. One of the better known companies was Giza Technologies, based in New Jersey and founded by Zekai Billman. This company was reported to have supplied components that ended up in the hands of the nuclear proliferation network led by Abdul Qadir Khan. Items were exported from the United States to South Africa and were allegedly redirected to Pakistan. Despite such serious allegations, Giza Technology continues to operate without major legal consequences. Another company involved was Pegasus General Trading, based in the United Arab Emirates. This firm was placed on the United States Department of Commerce's entity list for trying to acquire items destined for Pakistan's unsafeguarded nuclear program. Officials found that Pegasus General Trading falsified documents and provided misleading information to obscure the true end user. A Pakistan-based company known as the National Engineering Services Trading and Consulting Company, or NESTAC, NESTACC, was also flagged for supporting unsafeguarded nuclear activities. The company had strong ties with the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission and received a high volume of dual-use goods from Pegasus General Trading, indicating a broader network of coordinated transfers. Another front company called Computer Communication USA, located in Maryland, was run by Nadeem Akhtar. His company illegally procured sensitive technology by collaborating with contacts in Dubai and Pakistan. The shipments often included fake documentation to conceal the true nature and destination of the items. In Rawalpindi, Pakistan, a company named Business World played a central role in the international smuggling ring. This network was responsible for transferring advanced technological equipment to the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission and the Advanced Engineering Research Organization. In 2019, 5 individuals connected to Business World were indicted by a United States federal grand jury. Another relevant company, Packland Corporation, worked closely with the Pakistan Atomic Energy Commission and helped procure barium carbide, a material used in nuclear reactors, from foreign sources. Euro Asian Engineering Supplies, based in Singapore, was also identified as a conduit for high technology testing equipment destined for Pakistan. The company routed shipments through several countries to disguise the final destination. Finally, the SMB Group, based in Dubai, had run by BS, who Dubai and run by BSA Tahir. No, wait, I'm going to do that. Finally, the SMB Group, based in Dubai and run by BSA Tahir, was a known facilitator within the Abdul Qadir Khan network. The company arranged the movement of nuclear-related materials and coordinated financial aspects of these illegal transfers across various regions. And the list goes on and on and on. But these are some of the more these are some of the examples that can be given if you're interested in knowing more about that. I've got tons of notes on this, so I'd be more than happy to send you guys any information if you do want it. Um, that's probably the best time to end the show. I hope you guys did enjoy this. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, give some feedback. Heck, just say hi. It doesn't matter. Just say hi, if nothing else. Um, you guys can find me on YouTube, DLive, Kick, Twitch, Rumble, and X. On Rumble and YouTube, I have the Wonderful World of Weirdness, which is, without saying, I have the channel for it. On X, Twitch, DLive, and Kick, all that is my account, which is Roger Hansen at ROGLOL1973 on X. On Twitch, I am Infamous1969. And on DLive, I am Roger_Hansen, as well as Roger_Hansen on Kick. So with that, I am done with my stream. I hope you guys have a good day, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. I hope. Good night. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will talk to you later before I cough my brains out. Thanks for watching. Bye.